At first, I didn't think it was real. I woke up to this blinding light, and I was transported to another place. Pluto TV! Then I heard a voice.
Come with me if you want to live.
There were thousands of movies and shows, and they were all free.
The truth is our secret.
It's just so beautiful.
On Pluto TV, free streaming of Terminator 2, Fringe, Arrow, The 100, and The X-Files may cause excitement, loss of sleep, and sudden belief in extraterrestrials. No credit cards or alien encounters necessary. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
The big game commercials are basically must-see TV. This year, Elf Cosmetics went all out with an absurdly funny telenovela called Melissa. It stars Melissa McCarthy, Nicholas Gonzalez, Itati Cantoral, and Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil. The Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil is an ultra-glossy tinted lip oil that nourishes, hydrates, and enhances your lips' natural color.
Watch the full episode of their new Elf novela on soyunbaño.com.
Ever wonder why so many people regain weight after stopping a GLP-1? Up to 40% of the weight lost can come from lean muscle. This weakens the body, slows metabolism, and makes it easier to put the pounds back on, creating a cycle of dependency. Prolon's 5-day fasting-mimicking diet offers a drug-free way to maintain results and support long-term metabolic health. In just 5 days, it activates fasting pathways to burn fat, protect muscle, and rejuvenate cells, all while letting you enjoy real food. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/iHeart. That's prolonlife.com/iHeart.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to One Thing Trump Did, available exclusively on the Middle podcast feed. I'm Jeremy Hobson. Each week on this podcast, we're looking at one thing President Trump did, since there is so much happening, and we're going to try and break things down in the same rational, nonpartisan, factual way we do on The Middle. Well, in this episode, our one thing is the new trade war that Trump has started with Canada, Mexico, and China. Trump ordered tariffs on goods coming in from all three countries, even though Canada and Mexico are in a free trade agreement with the U.S. called the USMCA, which Trump himself negotiated in his first term. The president claims these countries are not doing enough to stop the flow of fentanyl into the United States. All three countries responded with tariff threats of their own. Here's Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do. We two friends fighting is exactly what our opponents around the world want to see.
Well, joining me now is Moody's Analytics Chief Economist, Mark Zandi. Mark, it's great to have you on the show. We haven't talked in a long time, but we used to talk all the time. It's great to have you.
Yeah, Jeremy, it's a pleasure. I love hearing your voice and seeing the face to the voice.
Yes, exactly. Our listeners can't see it right now, but you can, and I can see your face. So let me ask you, I guess let's just start with the sort of the pros and cons of tariffs. They go all the way back in this country to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln liked them. What are they good for?
Well, I'd say what I would call targeted strategic tariffs might be useful. So, for example, we have a beef with China over certain trade arrangements, and in that case, targeted tariffs to make a point about the unfair trade practices would be a possible use. In fact, President Biden did that towards the end of his term. He imposed tariffs on about $18 billion worth of product from China. Very targeted, batteries, EVs, certain types of products that are, very strategic. So, I especially in the world that we live in, where the World Trade Organization is no longer, a very viable institution, and we've given up on free trade deals. If you go back before President Trump, President Obama came pretty close to signing a trade deal with Pacific Rim nations, the so-called Trans-Pacific Partnership. That was a free trade deal that excluded China because they did not play fair, and that was the strategy. But in this world that we live in, with that all blown up and WTO neutered, I think strategic tariffs are a tool that has some use. But much beyond
basically,
that, I don't see it.
You're saying, like, if you would use the tariff specifically for the thing that you want to have made in America, like this item, I want to specifically target this thing because that's going to have a direct effect. You wouldn't use the tariffs just to get countries to do other things that you want.
Yeah, exactly. So solar panels. Let's say the Chinese are way ahead of us on solar panels. They dominate the market. Those panels are subsidized by the Chinese. Very difficult for that industry to make any headway here in the United States. So you say to the Chinese, hey, guys, you're not playing fair with regard to solar panels. Chinese says, I think we are. Well, in that case, you can say, okay, I'm going to impose tariffs on your solar panels to make it viable for my solar panel industry to develop and to grow. So in that case, it is case by case, it's product by product, it's country by country. I see a use case for tariffs, but beyond that, I don't.
And when you look at the negatives, for the last many decades, the U.S. has embraced free trade around the world. We have not been very tariff heavy. Why? What are the arguments against using tariffs?
It's a tax. It's a tax on American consumers and business people. And it's a very regressive tax in that it's borne to a larger degree by lower and middle income Americans because of the share of the budget that they devote to imported goods compared to higher income households. It invites retaliation. Other countries don't sit on their hands. They say, hey, that doesn't make sense to me. That's not fair. You can see it. The Chinese have already retaliated with regard to the tariffs President Trump just put into place. Canadians, they put in some tariffs. As this tariff war goes on, the trade war goes on, more and more countries will put on their own tariffs and trade restrictions, which hurts American jobs. And then, longer run, it impedes competition. Competition, I think, most of us would agree is a good thing. It makes businesses really focus on being the best at what they do, efficient, offer the lowest price to consumers and to businesses, and they innovate. They're looking for ways to come up with new products and services and do different things to serve their marketplace, and that competition is a very, very healthy thing. So you undermine that with tariffs. You make it much more difficult for that to occur. And then in the current context, the way the president is implementing the tariffs is creating this chaos, havoc, because no one knows what they are on again, off again, this country, that product, this product, that company. There's something that businesses label stroke of the pen risk, meaning if the president can do something with the stroke of a pen, and tariffs, because of its executive order, he can, they're just not going to touch it because they have no idea, what the president's going to do. And if you have no idea, how can you make any kind of investment decision or hiring decision? You just can't. So you sit on your hands, and that's what's the problem in the here and now.
Right. And just to remind our listeners, the president basically, when he came into office, said, I'm going to put these tariffs on Mexico and Canada right away. Then he had conversations with the leaders of both countries on the phone, then said, we're going to do a 1 month delay. And then he came back in and said, okay, now we're going to do it for real, the beginning of March. and then like a day later pulled back on that too. But it's very uneven. It's not quite clear, which things will have tariffs in the meantime. But it is this on again, off again, something that businesses also just don't like, that kind of uncertainty.
How do you deal with that? Okay, I'm a manufacturer. I'm trying to decide whether I should invest in a new, food processing plant, right? That processing plant is going to be in operation for at least a decade, maybe 2 decades. So I'm deciding where I'm going to locate that food processing plant based on the rules that are in place. But if there's no rules and the rules are changing, how can I make that investment decision? I'm a business person. I'm an economist, but I'm a business person. I have a couple hundred economists around the globe that work for me, and we have to make business decisions. And, if I'm going to think about an investment, I open up a spreadsheet, very simply put in my expected revenue, put in my expected cost, calculate a return, compare that to my cost of capital. If my return is greater than the cost of capital, I make the investment. If I can't fill in every cell in that spreadsheet, I can't calculate the return, I can't do the calculation. It's not like I go fire people, but I say I'm not doing that until I can actually put it in the spreadsheet. You can't put anything in a spreadsheet in the current environment because it's all over the place. So who knows, how this is going to play out. And the other thing that is even more kind of debilitating is we don't know what the motivations are. Tell me what's motivating all this. Then I can maybe make some judgment as to how it's all going to play out. But I can't tell you what the motivations are. They're just all over the place. So given that, I can't fill in this. I can't fill in the cells in the spreadsheet. I can't calculate. I'm not investing,
right.
And that's what's happening.
Well, and on the motivation side, we mentioned that he says he wants to stop the flow of fentanyl, but if you actually look at the numbers, the fentanyl overdose deaths in this country are way down over last year. And then on the issue of kind of what Trump wants, it seems like right now he is punishing countries even when they do exactly what he asks. So it's like, am I supposed to do what he wants in order to get these tariffs removed? Or does it matter because he might just punish me anyway, even if I do what he asks for?
Yeah, I mean, he said, look, I want you guys to Canada and Mexico to work on the fentanyl problem and the immigration problem. Well, there's a great piece in the New York Times this weekend. The problem on the Canadian border is that Americans are illegally going into Canada, not the Canadians coming into the United States. So what's the problem? What are we trying to fix? And the Canadians are asking themselves that question too. And by the way, they're getting pretty upset about it, because they go, "What the heck is this all about?" And they can't figure it out. And so they're naturally upset. And you can see it already if you go look at foot traffic at stores across the border from the Canada into the United States, way down. If you look at hotel occupancy in those same cities, way down. I mean, they're boycotting American product, and you go, well, okay, but they can't figure out what the problem is. What are you trying to do here? And so they think it's all made up. And so if it's all made up, then how do you respond to that? What do you do with that?
Yeah, they've taken Jack Daniels off the shelves apparently in Ontario, and the CEO of Jack Daniels is very upset. He said this is worse than the tariffs because we're not even for sale right now in Canada. But who are the winners and losers in right now in a trade war? Let's just talk about Canada. Who are the winners and losers if we're in the middle of this? And are the U.S. consumers going to pay more because of our tariffs on Canada or because of Canada's retaliatory tariffs on us?
All of the above. I mean, take steel and aluminum, right? That's what the president has been focused on in terms of tariffs on products, because that's what he did in his first term in that trade war, and that's what he's doing here this go-around. Who benefits is the steel and aluminum producers, because they're protected. They benefit from the tariff. Jeremy, how many people work in the steel and aluminum industry? I'll tell you, 125,000 people. I think Walmart, I have no idea, but you can Google it or ChatGPT. It's got to be at least twice that, Walmart. So we're protecting that. And then, okay, now think of where steel and aluminum goes. Remember that food processing plant? Well, it goes there. If you want a can of tuna, it goes into the vehicle industry. It goes into the machine tool industry. It goes into the aircraft industry. Those guys get nailed. The building industry. Think about this for a second. Look. We've got an affordable housing shortage. We can't put up enough homes because the cost of building is too high. Now we impose tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. Well, the cost of lumber is going up. The cost of all electrical equipment and materials that go into the homes are going up. The washing machines and dryers and fixtures, the price of that's going up. Now the builders are looking at that. They go, now I'm going to have to raise the price even more. I can't build an affordable home. So who wins in all this? The steel and aluminum guys with 125,000 employees, or the rest of the economy, the rest of us, we're paying a higher price. And that's even before the retaliation. That's even before Canada, Mexico, and China retaliate and put their own restrictions and tariffs on. So, and then you ask yourself, look, if we actually go down this path of a full-blown trade war, and I wouldn't have said that I thought we were going in that direction 4 or 6 weeks ago, but I don't know. But it feels like we're going down that path. Then that's going to push us very likely into an economic downturn recession. And then the steel and aluminum guys are even going to be hurt by that because they're going to sell less. So who wins? Nobody wins. Nobody wins.
Well, and I want to ask you about the economic consequences of this after the break. But just before we take a quick break, do you see a strategy here on the part of the Trump administration? Is there a game plan? Is there a long-term plan on how this is all going to play out and why this is going to get something for the United States that it hasn't gotten so far?
I'm guessing. I don't know. I mean, 4 motivations. I'll just list them. One, it's just politics. I said I was going to do this. Now I'm doing it. Number 2, the trade balance, trying to get the U.S. trade deficit down. That's not going to work with tariffs. 3, try to incent or force businesses, foreign and domestic, to produce more in the United States. That's definitely not going to happen with the trade war. 4th, and this is the one that feels like it more likely increasingly, I want revenue. It's a tax. I'm going to tax American consumers and business. I'm going to generate this revenue. And I want that because I want to pay for other stuff I want to do on the tax side, other tax cuts that we're talking about for corporations and, raising the cap on the SALT tax, all that kind of stuff. Kind of reorient, where the revenue comes from. If that's the case, Jeremy, and our foreign partners figure that out, they're going to realize this is going to be in place. These tariffs are going to be in place for the foreseeable future. You can count on them responding with their own tariffs and trade restrictions. We're going to be in a full-blown outright trade war. It's going to land us in recession. And he's going to have to back. There's no ways he's going to have to backtrack on this whole process.
But that tax, the indirect tax on American consumers that are paying more for goods, that one is okay with the Club for Growth and the Republicans. Basically, like that's not a tax that they would be against. Because it's not the government directly.
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. Is that rhetorical?
Yeah, it's rhetorical. Well, stand by. We're going to continue with Moody's Analytics Chief Economist Mark Zandi in just a moment. One Thing Trump Did. We'll be right back.
Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured 2 prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years, right, where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can, to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of bitch to come around here with my wife. Boom, boom.
This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I actually drop better when I'm high. It heightens my senses, calms me down. If anything, I'm more careful. Honestly, it just helps me focus.
That's probably what the driver who killed a 4-year-old told himself. And now he's in prison. You see, no matter what you tell yourself, if you feel different, you drive different. So if you're high, just don't drive. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to One Thing Trump Did exclusively on the Middle podcast feed. I'm Jeremy Hobson. This episode, we're talking about tariffs on our adversary China and on our friends in Mexico and Canada. I'm joined by Moody's Analytics chief economist, Mark Zandi. Mark, I guess let's talk about China for a second because they are a huge economy. We haven't really been focusing as much on China as we have on Canada and Mexico, just because it's a little more surprising to have these tariffs go on Canada and Mexico. But in terms of China, a lot of the tariffs from the first Trump administration did continue under the Biden administration, but now they're ramping up further. Do you worry about what are you concerned about when it comes to China and these tariffs? And do you worry that a trade war with China could turn into something more?
I do. First level of concern is, it just means higher prices. China is a massive trading partner, right? I mean, China, Canada, and Mexico each account for about the same amount of imports into the United States. They're $500 billion a year. 13% of total imports are from each of those countries. So they matter. All of them matter a lot. So it's a big trading partner, and if we jack up tariffs on their product and they jack up tariffs on our product, that does a lot of damage in terms of the taxes, the tariffs that our consumers are going to pay and businesses are going to pay, and it hurts American companies that sell into China. So that's going to happen. But more broadly, and by the way, we're talking about big tariff increases now, right? Because under President Trump's first term, the tariff increased effective tariff rate on Chinese product was 10%. Mm-hmm. Now with everything he's announced, we're now at 30%, and it's rising 30%. So that's a pretty massive increase in tariffs. So that it's not inconsequential. But the thing that worries me is that our economies are now quickly moving apart. They already have decoupled and they're disengaging, and it's becoming self-reinforcing. Yes, they didn't play fair, but we hit them over the head. So now they're pulling away and playing less fair, and we're just pulling away like this. And the thing I do worry about longer run, and maybe it's not as long run as I think, is the geopolitical implications of that. Take Taiwan. Where Taiwan is sitting there, the Chinese say that's part of their country. We say, oh no, it's not. And by the way, our economy is very reliant on Taiwan because we get, despite everything, we still get a lot of our chips from Taiwan. Right. They're critical to the chip industry and everything else that the chips go into. And it's one thing when our economies are integrated, and we're tightly wound together as we were back in 2017-18. Just think about when you're hugging somebody, it's very difficult to hit them over the head, because you're hugging them. You don't you're tied together. But if you're apart and you're staring each other down and you're not as dependent on each other economically, and that's certainly the case, much more likely, something's going to happen, geopolitically, militarily. We're going to take a swing at each other. There's going to be a mistake. Tensions are already rising. You can see it in the South China Sea. The Chinese Navy is creating havoc for the Filipino sailors. You see what they had exercises off the coast of New Zealand and Australia. There's a Chinese air fighter that went into the Japanese airspace for the first time in decades. It's happening. And I just worry that something is, even by mistake, is going to occur. And we have another level of hurt here. It's not just a trade war, it's an actual war.
What about the strength of the economies in these countries? I was kind of surprised on our trip to Canada to hear from people who are Canadian about how bad their economy is, right? How bad they feel their economy is right now. And I'm like, oh, right. The U.S. is actually in a much better position post-COVID than a lot of other countries, even our close neighbor Canada. Their dollar is way down, so it's very expensive for them to buy things from the United States anyway. What about China right now? China's economy is not in near the kind of shape that the U.S. economy is right now.
Yeah, that's very true. In part because of this decoupling. I mean, the Chinese economy is much more open, does much more trade than the U.S. And so when the U.S. and China pulled apart here over the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, that hurt both our economies, but it hurt the Chinese economy more. So, I do think the Chinese economy is struggling with that and other issues. The real estate downturn is doing havoc. They have all kind of environmental issues, state-owned enterprises. They kind of backtracked on some of the privatization efforts that they put in place over the last couple of decades. So they definitely are having difficulty. This U.S. economy that came into this year the strongest in the world by orders of magnitude. So a very different place. But having said that, the Chinese economy is a authoritarian economy. It's not a democracy.
Right.
And they can digest a lot of pain and before it has any political ramifications. Doesn't mean it's going to change their policies or Xi's views on anything anytime soon. Very, very different than in democracies like Canada or even Mexico.
Although we remember the pressure
situation
that they came under with the COVID lockdowns, and then all of a sudden people started protesting President Xi, and then they said, "Oh, never mind, no more lockdowns. You just do whatever you want now. The rules are done."
Yeah. I don't think that's conducive to a well-functioning economy in the long run, but it gets them through these scrapes that they're in right now. Yeah.
What about the U.S. economy? How worried are you about a recession just because of the tariffs? There's a lot going on. I'm going to ask you about it, but what about just the tariffs? Could that lead the U.S. into a recession?
It could, depending on the scenario. I mean, let's suppose President Trump follows through on everything he said he's going to do on Canada, on Mexico, on China, on the EU, on steel, on autos, on the pharmaceutical industry. He follows through and he imposes those tariffs and leaves them there for any length of time, a few months, a couple quarters. That's the fodder for an economic downturn. Yeah. Now, something else might have to come along and push us in, but it wouldn't take much to push us in at that point. Things happen all the time. And clearly, you said don't think about all the other economic policies that are playing out here, because they're also creating a lot of uncertainty, as everyone knows. But even abstracting from those other things, I do think the tariffs, if we got into a full-blown trade war, knockout, drag out with other countries, recession is a real possibility, yes.
Yeah, if you think about the other economic changes happening since Trump came in just a matter of weeks ago, you have the huge cuts to the federal government, layoffs of tens of thousands of federal workers at least, the tariffs, new focus on Bitcoin, giant tax cuts could be on the horizon that would definitely favor the wealthy, not to mention the billionaires with power that they've never had before in this country. What do you focus on as an economist as you look at all of those changes?
Well, all of the above, but first front and center is the trade war. Second is the Doge, contemporaneous with the trade war is the Doge cuts to not only to government employment but to federal funding. It's affecting large parts of the private sector and other parts of the economy because of the funding cutbacks or the freezes on funding. I do worry in the most immediate future about a government shutdown. That's a possibility here in the next couple, 3 weeks. I worry about the immigration policy in the context of labor supply. Certain industries rely very heavily on immigrant labor, construction, manufacturing, transportation, distribution, very, very reliant on immigrants, both documented and unauthorized. And then the thing that is going to come on the radar screen here, it hasn't come up yet, but it will, is the Treasury debt limit. That clock is ticking. That Treasury, that debt limit has now been reinstated. Treasury can't issue debt beyond that, so they're running down their cash, and they're going to run out of cash sometime in late July, early August. At that point, someone's not going to get paid. That's a default. So that's a real drama that's going to play out here at some point in the spring and the summer. So there's a lot of things to worry about. They're all, they all come together in a very noxious kind of uncertainty stew, and the economy is gagging on that. And if this continues on for much more longer, the economy is going to choke on it, and that's a recession.
I have been through my share of debt limit fights, and they usually pull back at the last second. But you never know right now, because they control everything at the moment. The Trump sort of MAGA right controls all the branches.
They do, but think about the uncertainty that it always creates, and think about the backdrop that we now have with regard to all the other things we're worried about. So throw into the mix a debt limit drama and the uncertainty on top of all the trade war drama, on top of the Doge drama, on top of the immigration drama, on top of the president's efforts to rework government drama. Just add that all up, and it becomes pretty tough to digest.
Let me just come around to one of the things that President Trump has said that the tariffs would help, which is like bringing back jobs in, let's say, manufacturing. Do you see the best case, the tariffs, have some sort of an impact? Could they actually bring back a lot of U.S. manufacturing jobs if done right?
No, not possible, not happening. First of all, we're not talking about a lot of jobs. The manufacturing base accounts for about 10% of all employment, 10%, and it's falling. It's falling. So the number of people working in manufacturing, that's flat to down. It's not going to rise. It's a very productive industry. Most of these plants that come into that are being constructed are robotics. They're not people. That goes to the how efficient these things are. And then why would any company decide to locate in the United States based on the current tariff regime? President Trump is going to be president through 2028. What happens after that? Again, these plants they're made to last for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. They're not for the next year or 2 years or 3 years. They're for the long run. So, am I going to count on that tariff that he put into place that's going to be there in 2029 or 2030? No chance. There's zero probability that's happening. And then on top of that, people around the world, every business person around the world is looking at what's going on here, and they're saying, how reliable is the U.S. Government and the rules of the road? The United States has a number of things that makes us exceptional. In the secrets, one of the elements of the secret sauce is the rule of law. There's rules. There's rules about how to change the rules, and everyone knows what they are, and they live by them, and they die by them, and the courts adjudicate those rules and decide what's right and what's wrong if there's any disagreement. You monkey with that, and that's what we're doing here. We're monkeying with that basic principle, the rule of law. They're going to say, what am I going to do with that? This is no different than if I located in, pick a country, somewhere else, not here. So it's just not, it's not conducive to supporting long-term investment. It's just not. So no, the answer is absolutely not. It's going to be just the opposite.
Do you think econ profs around the country are starting to teach Hawley Smoot in a bigger way now?
You know what? I think they should show one of my favorite movies is Ferris Bueller's Day
Ferris
Off.
Bueller. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Top 10.
Yeah. Actually, that is one of my favorite movies too. And there's a sort of behind the scenes. There's another professor, not Ben Stein, but there's another professor where Sloane Peterson is in the class, and then she gets pulled out. And the professor was like a Second City comic, and he wanted to stress all the wrong syllables to make it as boring as possible. And so he goes, "In what way does the author's use
of the prison
Anyway, I remember that very vividly.
I don't remember
Mark,
that. I gotta go watch it.
You got to go
again.
back and watch that again.
Yeah.
It's very funny. Mark Zandi, Chief Economist for Moody's Analytics. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, anytime, Jeremy.
And thanks for listening to One Thing Trump Did. It was produced by Brandon Condritz and Harrison Patino. Our next middle episode will be in your podcast feed later this week. We'll be joined by a pair of artificial intelligence experts to take your questions about AI. You can call in at 844-4MIDDLE. And if you like this podcast, rate it, tell your friends, and make sure you sign up for automatic downloads. Our theme music was composed by Noah Haidu. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and I'll talk to you next time.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969. Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I actually drop better when I'm high. It heightens my senses, calms me down. If anything, I'm more careful. Honestly, it just helps me focus.
That's probably what the driver who killed a 4-year-old told himself. And now he's in prison. You see, no matter what you tell yourself, if you feel different, you drive different. So if you're high, just don't drive. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
When segregation was a law, one mysterious Black club owner, Charlie Fitzgerald, had his own rules.
Segregation in the day, integration at night.
It was like stepping in another world.
Was he a businessman, a criminal, a hero?
Charlie was an example of power. They had to crush him.
Charlie's Place, from Atlas Obscura and Visit Myrtle Beach. Listen to Charlie's Place on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.